Marhaba! Welcome back to the SKAM Watch Podcast. Today, we're talking about Season 1, Episode 2 of Julie Andem's SKAM called Jonas. This is totally dumb. And so in this episode, it's autumn break, and Eva, Jonas, and Isak go on a cabin trip. However, Eva is annoyed that her boyfriend invited Isak and later Ilias on a trip that was supposed to be reserved for just the two of them. She also begins to suspect that Jonas is keeping secrets. Dun dun dun. So I can tell you that as far as the podcast goes, this was certainly our most contentious and, dare I say, dramatic episode yet. We talked about what we loved, what we hated. I'm not naming names. We also talked about feminism, influential books and literature, friend crushes, both online and IRL, and some of our problematic faves. We also talk about music in the episode. We talk about performative masculinity, and we also talk about genre and how it's kind of switched up a little bit whenever characters are at a cabin. So without further ado, we want to thank you all again for joining us and for listening to the podcast. And thank you all so much for the love and support. It really means the world to us. And yeah, we hope you enjoy this very candid conversation about Season 1, Episode 2 of SKAM.
Sorry. So, guys, what did you think of this week's episode? I will start and say that I really hated it.
Oh my gosh. Hate is such a strong word. Do you use the word hate a lot?
Not often, but this is this was my least favorite episode of all 43 episodes.
Why?
It just, I was bored through most of it.
Oh my God.
And it was just like kind of demoralizing. I was just feeling like sad and mad and angry, and also like now rewatching it, I know they're all better than this episode. Like every character in this episode is better than this, like in the show is better than this episode.
Wow.
Except for maybe, but
so did you think it was a bad episode?
Really
or did you just not like the way they were speaking in the episode, or like not like who they were?
Well, I didn't like who they were, and I felt like the episode was too long. Like,
okay,
I was
thank
done
you so much,
watching
Sam, for joining. I loved it.
We're so sorry to see you go.
I thought it was very important, but I want to hear more from you, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
I got it. I got the dynamic like real quickly, and I just didn't need to keep watching it.
Okay. I mean, it was genuinely 15 minutes long, so.
Yeah, like, can you pinpoint a little bit? Like, could you be more specific?
Right.
I hate that she was like inside cooking dinner. When she reset the table, like Isak just like threw the silverware down on the table.
Okay,
and so she went to reset the table. I was so mad. I was like, why?
Because she made a point to ask him. She made a point to ask him, did you set the table? And he's like, yeah. And then you go and you see, and there's like napkins and like some cutlery strewn about.
Yeah, and I get why she reset the table, but just she wasn't there to be the mothering servant. She was there to have like originally, I'm assuming, a fun romantic weekend with her boyfriend, right, and ended up having to mother these 3 teenagers. And then also just like she doesn't trust her boyfriend, and they kept rubbing it in that she doesn't have any friends. When Jonas says like you could have invited someone, I'm like, ugh. And her face says it too. She's like, no, I couldn't have, and you know that, so why would you say that to me?
Yeah, that was really brutal.
Really frustrating.
So I didn't hate the episode. I found it like very important because you kind of like in the first episode you're kind of introduced into the whole world of it all, and then in this one it's kind of like, and this is like how things really are. Like you thought it was like this, and like you think you have no idea. Into diary, if you will. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was like interesting to see. Because the first episode, you just see Eva kind of like moping about in a way, you know? And, like, I do like that you get to see her, like, get angry. Like, I think that's interesting. Mm-hmm. But I think this episode was interesting to kind of see the shifting dynamics with Isak, Eva, and Jonas plus Ilias. But it was interesting to see just, like, the 3 of them, because, you know, they spend so much time together. It was interesting to see that and how kind of whenever they were playing that game, which like men love trivia, don't they? Like facts.
I mean,
Like,
I love it too. So what is that?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of trivia, and I'm like currently recruiting for a trivia team.
but like, you know,
But
how,
Alex, go ahead and make your point.
Like you're wrong, but
Yeah.
make your point.
no, but like, do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
facts. Like,
Yes.
like I hate that shit so much, but like guys really like love it, you know.
Yeah.
And so whenever like she couldn't get the
And,
question
yeah.
right, and then it just
Yep.
like continued that trend of them being like, haha, you idiot. But like Jonas like changed the question so she would get it wrong. Did you notice that? Because like it was like, who's the first prime minister of Norway, and then he asked like, who was the first female prime minister of Norway, and she answers incorrectly. She answers the second female prime minister of Norway.
Yeah.
So he was like already setting her up to fail, which like that's shady as fuck. But just like again the like kind of boy broy pile on thing. But I thought it was so interesting to see. Because, like, I love that Isak arrived early. Like, that's so shifty, you know? Like, he was probably...
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
I just was thinking, like, why did he invite him? What teenage boy who's going away with his girlfriend for the weekend also says, let me bring my best friend?
Yeah, but...
It just doesn't make sense to me now that I'm thinking about it.
Maybe,
well, I'm
like...
wondering if it was like one of those things, you know, where him and his bros were like chatting and he was talking about this thing and his, you know, they sort of made their plan when they were hanging out. Like they heard he was going to this cabin. And so it was like, oh, that'd be so fun. And he'd be like, yeah, you can come. It's totally chill. Just like not thinking about it.
Speaking from very personal experience, the dynamics of like the couple and the best friend are very weird and like tenuous, and so I can't answer that for you, but that is very strange. But because it seems like the three of them do things a lot together, you know, like if you look at the Instagrams that are posted, they like the three of them like hang out a bunch, so it's like hard, like the boundary between like couple time and like trio time is so like porous, I guess. And so
But it was interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was interesting though how, like in my mind, it seems like he invited Isak as an excuse to invite Ilias, because it's almost like the reaction that Ava has to Isak coming is kind of Isak's reaction to Ilias, which is like, why does this person have to come? I was supposed to be your main
like enough
hang out.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, everyone wants to be like enough. That's just so gross. Like...
And so then I don't know. I took it all as like Ilias is sort of the douchiest of the group. You know, he's like the extra hyper masculine. So like the tone, we were like saying, it switches a lot. So you go from the three of them on the rock and Isak is like, play I'm Yours by Jason Mraz. To like, suddenly when like Ilias
songs,
which was but then
messy.
as soon as Ilias shows up and they start playing
Eminem.
That Eminem, and so it was just like,
that's real.
Wow, the shift and Eminem is the most problematic of all.
Right. Yeah, and it was interesting because it was so interesting to see like the dynamic that, or like the role that Isak was playing with Ava and Jonas, and then whenever Ilias comes, like the shift that like Isak is like, oh, like Ava and I are really good friends because he doesn't feel like he can like, well, one, like Ilias like said he was gay, which like Loki he is, but not, you know, not out, you know, so don't do that, that's bad. But then to see him kind of shut out from like that friendship, and so he kind of decides to like, no, like I'm friends with Ava too, like that's I find that really interesting and like subtle and telling.
Yeah, and kind of tying this into our last episode, for me it all feels so performative again, like everyone is performing their role, and then as soon as someone else is introduced, the dynamic shifts, so everyone is forced to like do something different except for the guy, you know, like
okay, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like,
the alpha male, you know, right? Because
Jonas, I don't feel like
I think Jonas shifted a bit. I think he got douchier. Yeah, like he was already being a jerk from the beginning, but like I felt like it was exacerbated when Ilias came.
Do you think so? Oh,
and and then Isak, like, you know, he was making fun of Ava with Jonas, and then the minute minute Ilias showed up, he's like, is it okay? Are you sure it's okay if I go? Like,
Yeah.
you don't need any help. Like, all of a sudden became someone who wanted to, like, it was like he was on her side because all of a sudden he was pushed to the outside as well.
It is just so weird because like we know they're better than that. Like I think that's why you hate it, because it's like we know like this isn't like you know, like you're capable of so much more and we've seen it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what makes it so
like,
great.
You see it like at the end of the episode.
Yeah, that's
like,
what I was gonna say.
Another random thing that I was just like in looking over my notes about this episode is this thing that Julie Andem does with the cabins. Whenever they're in a cabin, it turns into a horror movie.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was interesting. Like it happens this time, it happens in the future when what's that guy's name? Casper.
Oh, I love Casper.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah, that is interesting though. Like
the
cabins are like these kind of like weird like genre shifts, but like less so in this episode than in the one later on. But
totally.
Sam, I think you wanted to talk about the episode opens up with her on the phone with her mother, and talking about like going on this trip. And Sam, you wanted to talk about that and like parents.
Yeah, so that was this was all of a sudden the episode where I was kind of like, where are the parents? Why is there no adult supervision anywhere? And so she's having this like really low-key conversation with her mom that sounds exactly the same way that I talk to a friend that I'm trying to like get dinner with. Like, oh, I'll be home on Friday. Oh, but I leave Friday morning. I'm like, this is so weird. But like when I started watching Alex, that was one of the first things that you told me when I said, what do I need to know about the show before I start watching? You were like, it's normal for parents to live away from their kids so they can go to a better school. But this episode, it really stuck out. Like just her whole conversation with her mom. There were parts of it that were like she was just talking to a friend, but then there were other parts where she said, her mom was like, if you wait a day, I can drive you. And do you have enough money? But then also tied into that is that like, and I don't know if I caught it when I watched it the first time to see just how serious this was, but Ava lies to her mom about who she's going with.
Yeah.
And so her mom thinks that she's going to this cabin with Ingrid and Sarah. So then I was like, okay, I'm sure her mom probably wouldn't be cool if she was like, yeah, I'm going with my boyfriend Jonas.
Right.
And his friend Isak. Which we find out like for other reasons later as well. But
yeah. It makes me wonder if she didn't tell her because she didn't want them to. I mean, obviously she hasn't told her mother that Ingrid and Sarah and her have fallen out. Which is interesting and also like quite real, you know, like for like a teen parent relationship, especially with like friends that have been yours for so long. Like I think we've all had experiences where we've like fallen out or been in like a tiff with like someone who like our parents like love or whatever, and so you just gotta pretend that like things are still good because you can't get into it, you know.
Yeah. Well, and we come back to that
right later on.
when the shit hits the fan. But
speaking of shiplap, I think we both Sam and I both wrote down shiplap because her living room has amazing shiplap. Shout out to all the Fixer Upper fans in the house. But so at the beginning of this episode is whenever she friend requests Noura. She requests her, she talks on the phone with her mom, and then she refreshes it. And I love that she refreshes it because like that's so real. And so I wanted to talk about friend crushes, and if you can think of like a memorable friend crush you've had and like how that worked out. Most of mine are like Twitter people that I would like, but like no offense to most people who live in this city, but like I'm already friends with people I want to be friends with here. I haven't had a friend crush like in a geographically convenient place in fucking ages. So most of my like friend crushes are like via Twitter, and those are like easily executable. You know, like you can befriend people via Twitter. But I
really how do you do it? Because I feel like I don't.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, I just tweet so much about, like, I tweet so much, period. And then I tweet so much about, like, very specific, I think, like, cultural things, like shows or music or whatever. And so I find people through that. I also like use Twitter as kind of like a cultural surveillance tool for myself to like see what certain like fans of certain whatever are up to. So I think that way. But so I have like a lot of Twitter crushes, like Twitter friend crushes for sure. And I have like a few that have like turned into like friendships, which is nice.
I think like this is probably a really weird platform for this to happen on a lot, but like I get really nervous connecting with people on LinkedIn.
Bye.
There's so many reasons. I know, but like for my job, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. And yeah, sometimes I just like they just like put all that stuff out there and you never know like who's looking at it. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, if I like look at this profile, is like my boss thinking that I'm gonna quit? Because like that's not the case. But like there's I don't know. I don't overthink things as much on other social media platforms. But I also like don't feel like I have like there's people that I like check in on Instagram that I'm not connected with, so their pictures don't pop up in my feed, but like I regularly check in on what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
What about like IRL, like friend crushes IRL?
Yeah, I have them.
Do you have them?
I do. I've had them, but some of them are still people that I'm very good friends with, and so I don't want them listening to the podcast.
Oh my God.
And identifying themselves. No, but I can think of some, and it's like I think it's fun, it's exciting, it's like
especially if you have no friends, like
yes, yeah,
like the thought of having one friend, like that must be some real feelings.
I think my experience with it has shifted a lot from like when I was in high school versus in my 20s now. Like in high school, I think I was a lot more like Eva, kind of like freaking out and refreshing, and oh my gosh, that whole thing she does. Does that happen in this episode? No,
yeah, where she types in
the next episode. That's the next episode.
Yeah.
But even that, like when she adds her, like the pressure of like, should I do it? Should I not refresh? Did they accept? Like I remember that in high school versus now. There's still a hint of it, but it's not quite as destabilizing. Like I'll be okay if we don't end up being good friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Alex, you're my like social media like friend crush.
Well, we're real friends, so that's good.
Yeah. So like it worked out. But
if
it was like still in high school, I probably like wouldn't ever have like you would be someone that I would like check in on your stuff but not actually follow you and like engage with you.
Shit. Wow. Well,
I also am terrible at making friends, which is this is working out really well for us. Well, for me at least, I can't speak for you.
It's great for me as well.
Alex, would you like to give a shout out to any of your Twitter crushes?
Oh, shit.
Friend crushes?
No. I have some like pretty specific ones, so.
Hey, if you think you're one of Alex's Twitter crushes, give us a shout on the SKAM Watch Podcast at tumblr.com or tweet at us.
Yeah.
Let us know if you think you're one of them.
I'm thinking of like two in particular. They're like, okay. I was thinking about IRL friend crushes, and the strongest one I had ended up being someone who like ruined my life.
That's so dramatic.
Right. I mean, I know.
No, that's upsetting.
But the main thing that I wanted to talk about in this episode is the book she was reading. They're playing the game in the cabin, and she's reading a book. And I've always wanted to like look up what the book was because I've rewatched this show a lot, and so I finally decided to look up what it was. And it is called The Daughters of Galya. I'm probably pronouncing all of this wrong. By Gerd Brottenberg, and she is. The novel was published in 1977. In the novel, the female is defined as the normal and the male as the abnormal subjugated sex. All words that are normally in masculine form are given in a feminine form and vice versa. So apparently it's like this really acclaimed like feminist work in Norway. And and I love that she like Ava's like actually reading it. You know, she's like deep into that book. Like I read a bunch now. I used to read as a child. I didn't read in high school. So the fact that she's like in that shit is like admirable. But it's also it kind of added like a new dimension to the way that because I think we can all relate whenever we're reading something that's kind of like theory based or like some sort of like critical text of something, it kind of like shifts the way that you see your like immediate surroundings and like daily interactions. And so I'm very interested to kind of see this episode and like the next few episodes like through the lens of like knowing that she was reading that book.
Mm.
But so, because there was an Instagram that was posted during this week's clips, these weeks of that week of clips, yeah. And it was a picture of Jonas and Isak wearing aprons and washing dishes, and the caption said, "My bitches, who looks better in an apron?" And so like so it was just kind of like a cool like
Who posted it?
layer. Ava posted it.
Huh.
So like looking at that, I know it was very interesting, and it made me think about like, so there's this talk that I watched with a an Australian feminist writer named Clementine Ford, and then two Australian actresses, one called Brenda Harding and one called Caitlin Stacey. And it was like this talk on feminism that they did. And Brenna, who was in a show called Puberty Blues, which is so good, she talked about a term called that she like came up with. She didn't like coin, she like just said it and it whatever, called fetal feminism, about like those kind of like early stages before you like are born, I guess, or like or like birthed into the world of whatever, that like are those early hints. And so my question was, if like this is Ava's like fetal feminism, which I feel like it is, when you kind of look at her arc and like where she goes and what she says and what she does, to me it feels like this is kind of like the beginning of something for her. My question was like, what was that for you?
What an excellent question.
So good.
Thank you. I'll answer first since I came up with it.
Yeah.
So it was hard for me to pinpoint this because I think I said this in last week's episode, but the school I went to in high school, like I never heard the word feminism once. Like I genuinely did not hear the term. I don't remember when, but it was like years later and like through pop culture. So I think my first introduction to like, I know it's weird because I think of like the Spice Girls. Like I was obsessed with the Spice Girls growing up. They meant so much to me. I loved girl power. Like I wanted to be a Spice Girl. So I think from the very beginning, before I like knew terms or equality or struggle or whatever, like just the concept of like girl power and like these like girls that like took up space and then some and then some and then some was like so fucking cool to me. So I think it kind of like opened my eyes very early on, which I think is so cool that, I mean, now it's kind of like, I think it's cool that culture can do that. Now culture is aware that it can do that and like does that for like marketing purposes. That's another topic. But so I think the Spice Girls were probably my like earliest introduction. But yeah, so my question is like, what do you think your earliest introduction was? And then what do you consider now to be the thing that like cemented your feminism, I guess?
I mean, the Spice Girls, I think for almost anybody like our age were probably pretty, I mean, they taught you what girl power was and that friendship was important. Like that was like, I mean, I learned that from the Spice Girls.
Right. Viva forever.
Yeah. So, but wait, what was the second question? Like, how did you phrase it?
Well, I think I'm interested to know, like, obviously we didn't know it at the time, but like looking back, what was your first introduction to like the ethos of feminism, and then what would you consider now to be like a defining like book or movie or speech or whatever that like cemented or solidified something in your mind? Because I think this is Ava's like fetal feminism moment, to use that Brenna Harding term. So I'm just interested to know what your alls were.
I think like because of the Spice Girls, I thought that feminism meant that you needed to like blindly support all women, and that women are just like, you just need to support women. And then y'all remember Sarah Palin? Remember when she showed up?
I've heard of her.
So that was like
How could we forget?
the first time that I was like, wait a minute, she's a woman, but like I don't care for this.
Really?
And then it was piggyback that onto I mean, I've bought all her albums, but Taylor Swift was so problematic for me from the beginning because
we're going there, listeners.
I mean, yeah, guys, it's happening. She just like she is the person that made me question what feminism looked like to me, and like what it meant to be a good role model for girls. And like every girl who showed up in her music video in a red dress with brown hair was the bad guy. And I was like, wait, this isn't right. Like, this is not, you can like be in love with a boy and without like it being at the expense of another girl. So like, I mean, I'm sure it was the same for lots of other people, but also it feels stupid to say, but like my identity as a feminist was like formed through Taylor Swift.
Oh my, like formed in reaction to?
In reaction to Taylor Swift.
That's so interesting.
Like her just her whole brand.
Yeah.
And like everything about her, I find everything about her is just like problematic to me. Like she's so calculated and so like nothing about her is real, and it is problematic to me because I don't feel like that is healthy.
Wow. For
people. But like, you know, like her songs are catchy and that's great, but like she's also just like not, I don't know. I quite enjoyed last summer when Kim Kardashian just like exposed Taylor. Like I was here for that. I was like, let's do this.
That was wild.
I remember exactly where I was when that happened.
Always and forever.
See, that's like
we'll remember that.
My life is so low that like in the past 3 years, whenever people are like, "Where were you?" and every time I was like, "I was on my desk." Like, "Where were you?" and it's like, "I was on my desk." Like, I'm at my desk a lot. Like, I was at my desk when all that shit happened.
Yeah, no, I was in my bed trying to go to sleep, and then ended up being up to like 4 a.m. and regretted it.
It's never like I got like a text at Six Flags.
No,
I got like a text message from a friend that said, "Follow Kim Kardashian on Snapchat. Something is happening," and then I was up all night, just like,
yeah.
Oh my god.
I don't think of it so much as like I was somewhere that was notable as much as in that moment I told myself, remember this.
Right.
Like, this is a thing.
This is one of those moments you're gonna want to tell your grandchildren about.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so interesting, Sam. Okay, Maryam, I want to hear yours.
Yeah, I think for me it was because so growing up I was always a very vocal, outspoken, like opinionated kid, and so for me it was in books. I think is where it started, like this full introduction. So it was things like Little Women and Anne of Green Gables and Matilda. Like those were such important books for me, and I haven't read them in a long time. So like I know going back in Pride and Prejudice. Oh my gosh! Oh, wow. But like going back and reading Little Women, all of that, like you see how dated it is.
Yeah.
But at such a young age, at least being able to have a character like Jo that I could identify with, like she was the one that had a temper or the one that was outspoken and very strong-willed. And so I think, yeah, just finding it in fiction. And then as far as like feminism goes, I can't like pinpoint the moment that I sort of started self-identifying as feminist because like growing up, feminism and feminist were never bad words. Like they were never things that I associate, you know, where it's like today, for instance, do you want to talk about Taylor Swift, or, you know, people ask like, do you identify as a feminist? And prior to her, you know, reinventing herself with her squad, quote, air quotes, God. There was this like hesitation where it's like, well, I believe that men and women should be equal, but like I wouldn't say I'm a feminist. And you're like, right. And but then you're like, what? Like if you think equality, that's the whole, anyway, whatever, you don't get it. And so I think that threw me off because I was like, oh, it's a thing, like to not identify as one. I didn't even know. And I think I also had always like for me, feminism was like old history stuff. And then growing up or, you know, kind of coming into adolescence or young adulthood and realizing like, oh yeah, there's still issues today. So then it was very like a seamless sort of like, okay, yeah, therefore we have feminism today to continue this fight. And so it was always strange to me when I saw the opposition to it. And I think just culturally, like growing up as an Arab American and like having so many strong matriarchal figures in my family or in like the extended family, I don't know. It just all sort of seemed assumed. Like it all was just like, yeah, obviously women should be at the forefront and feminism is important and all these things. And like kind of going back to what you were saying in the last episode again about this idea of like unlikable actress, you know, women, unlikable characters, and really they're just strong, dynamic characters that are not defined by their relationship with a man or lack thereof, or like by the men in their life.
Yeah.
Then as far as like current touchstone or like something, I mean, it's such a unsurprising answer, but like Roxane Gay, 100%. Like reading Bad Feminist was it was just a remarkable read. It still is a remarkable book. And then even seeing how she like deals with Twitter and like deals with.
Have you read Hunger?
Not yet. It's on my list. I felt like I was I need to be in a stable space. And since we just moved back into the house, I'm like ready now to read it.
That fucked me up. Like
that's what everyone says.
Get ready.
Everyone says.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not ready. I don't think that you
either.
can be ready ever.
No.
I'm ready for the fact that it's going to be difficult. And that's it. But yeah, because she's just amazing in so many ways. But I also love, like, she's so freaking brilliant. Like, she's so brilliant, and her use of words all the time is so on point. And she's not being apologetic. She doesn't fall into these roles of like being deferential when she's, you know, like she's not out here like trying to prove anything to anybody.
Right.
And so she's like, I'm always trying to model myself after her. And yeah.
I can see that. Like in like what you write on social media or whatever, I can see that. I can see the Roxane Gay influence on it.
Wow. Yeah. Because I used to be so like, who was it? I was actually just listening to a Vic Mensa interview where he said something that really resonated about, he was like, I'm not a contrarian. Like, it's not just intentionally, you know, I'm not out here trying to start arguments or trying to start a fight, but I'm also not going to be apologetic about what I have to say anymore. And so it's like my truth and my reality are going to be triggers for some people, but that's not on me. You know, like it's not on me to police my language or police what I say because it's going to make you uncomfortable. Like I at least have a self-awareness to know this is my situation, this is your situation, here's how my reality is probably going to impact yours.
Right.
Whereas those other people haven't even thought about anyone else's lived experience other than their minute-to-minute existence.
Wow.
Yeah, anyway, I just thought that was such like, because like, you know, that like Julie is like, you know, she's probably read that book. She probably loves that book. Like, I think it was so fucking cool that they did that. And, like, the fact that I read what the book was, like, really does kind of make me reassess. Because then, like, at that dinner, she, like, blows up. And she's like, what the fuck? Like, why the fuck are you texting Ingrid? Like, I know you're doing this. Like, I liked that it, like, you know, I already said this, but, like, whenever you read these things, like, that are so revolutionary, and you kind of look into your life and you're like, no, like this is like fucked up. Like, no, like, why are you texting her? Like, so I like.
And then it starts to give you the language to address, because I'm so glad that you looked that up, because I didn't know that, and it does add so much like richness to this episode and into the next episode, because
the whole season.
It affirms. It's that thing where it like affirms what you felt. But didn't have the words for. Like, you know, there's something wrong with the situation. You know, it's not right. You read this thing and you're like, oh my God, like that's me. I see myself in that.
I brought show and tell. Like, obviously you can't show and tell on a podcast, but I have like 6 books that I just like wanted to, but this for me was like the one that brought everything together. And I just held up a copy of Angela Y. Davis's Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundations of a Movement. And it's just a bunch of like speech transcripts that she's given at different places. But like for me, this is I mean, this only came out a couple of years, like maybe even last year or whatever.
No, it came out, yeah, like,
Yeah, but like the fact that it like kind of brought everything together to me was like because I'd been reading about a bunch of like the topics that are kind of talked about in there and like kind of seen the hints at the intersection of them, but to see her just like bring them all together and like have it be one thing and like one story and like actual liberation, for me that was like the one that I read and I was like, okay, like I'm good. Not like I'm good, like, but like
yeah.
I got this. Like I see the picture, and obviously I don't see the picture, and obviously there's more to learn. Blah blah blah. But for me, that was the most recent thing. But I wonder, I wonder what other feminist books Ava was reading. You know, because I'm sure she did.
I think also, side note, this lends itself to the whole conversation about people who are problematic demanding an education from others when like the information's out there. You just have to dedicate the time to doing it on your own. Because that's how I feel like, and again, I still obviously have so much to learn and I'm by no means whatever, but so much of it was done on my own, just like reading stuff, reading Twitter, reading books, reading articles, like it's all there. You just have to decide that it's worth it. And,
as they say, Google is free. Sam, are you still there?
I'm here, guys.
Okay.
I need to just like, add some more books to my book list. So.
What else we
you guys talked about like real books, and I talked about like Taylor Swift. So,
I think that's
over here.
No, I love,
I think that's so important because like honestly, the first time I might have heard the word feminism, and this shows you how like fucking insulated my world was for a while, was like maybe Lena Dunham. Like I come to a lot of things. I come through a lot of things like through
It's been great knowing you, Alex. And so anyway, on that note,
you know she's like a problematic fave of mine.
Yeah.
But I used to come to a lot of like theory, social justice shit like through pop culture, like kind of like reverse engineer or whatever. Yeah. So I don't know. It might have been her, which is no. It was definitely like. I think now I remember. This is okay. This is real. So I used to be like a really huge Kelly Clarkson fan. Like my
used to.
That's so rude. My first username was Fan of Clarkson. And I used to be a part of a American Idol message board, and my username was So Glad Kelly Won because like I didn't know how to create a username.
I'm laughing with you. With you.
So the first time I heard feminism was whenever someone in a magazine asked her, "Do you identify as a feminist?" So I think that was it actually, because I used to buy every magazine that she was in, and scrapbook them, and then I gave her one, and her dog toys.
Oh, wow.
And she said she had laryngitis and she couldn't speak, and she mouthed. She was like, "Thank you," and I was like, "You don't have to thank me. You've already given us enough."
Is that really what you said?
Yep.
And this was last year?
I was in the 8th grade, I believe.
Wow. So this was like Justin Guarini was like still on the scene.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. Well, he's still on the scene because he's in Dr. Pepper commercials, and he performed at the Tonys.
Also, he performed at the Tonys, and I remember saying out loud, "Wait, Justin Guarini?" But
just, I mean, like he like omnipresent in pop culture.
Right. Well,
I was gonna say social media, but it wasn't quite a thing yet.
No, I think this was like the breakaway days.
Oh.
I used to call into our local radio station 150 times a night to vote for her on our top 5 at 9 because I used to think that meant something. And the main DJ was like so lovely to me, and like I think he thought that something was up with me because he was so gracious. But then whenever like the other guy was on, he'd be like, "Yeah, we know, we already got your call," and I was like, "Fuck you." And so I'd call back in different voices because like I really wanted her to get that number 1 spot.
You absolutely have to leave all of that in the podcast.
Please.
Wow.
So I think my first time hearing the word feminism was when Kelly Clarkson said she wasn't one in a magazine, but now she identifies as one, so it's all good, people.
Yeah, I don't remember the first time. It's just a word that I feel like was always floating around, and I don't think I associated it with like contemporary relevance until
Well, here's like maybe an ignorant question. Some people say that like Islam is like the most feminist religion. What are your thoughts? I mean, I can edit this out. Like, I don't, you know.
No, I think, like, I'm just so, like, weary of any claim to anything as far as religion goes. Like, I don't really think, I don't think you can ascribe adjectives to a religion. I think you can ascribe it to the people practicing that religion. So there's that. But certainly, like, as far as historical significance goes, I think, yeah, like, Islam was certainly ahead of its time. Like, when it came about, women were literally, I mean, people would, like, bury their baby daughters in the sand. Like, that was how horrible it was to have a child that was born or assigned female at birth. It was just, like, such all shame and blah, blah, blah. And so then, like, when Islam came around, like, women were given certain rights that didn't exist as far as, like, rights to owning property and rights to owning, to owning stuff, to having a certain sense of agency, to having rights as far as, like, being protected within this, like, extraordinarily patriarchal society. And I'm trying to think of what else. I know I'm forgetting so many things. But so as far as, like, the case for, like, making a historical case, sure. I think Islam, like, it did liberate, you know, to, you know, within that context, like, it did a lot for women. But I also think that, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, because you know how there's, like, in-house conversations versus, like, so how do I say this, like, in a way where, like, not everyone here is Muslim.
Yeah,
I don't mind. I think, like, so, like, again, like, patriarchy, so real. So, like, to this day, you know, you'll have guys that think they're championing women, like, within the Muslim community or within any community, and then they'll say things like, oh, look at, you know, Islam liberated women and it did this and this and that. And so then I'm like, okay, so 1400 years ago when Islam showed up and these rights were being given, yeah, it was radical AF, and it was, like, huge in as far as, like, as a liberating force for women. But, like, we're now in 2017, and I feel like that the spirit of liberation has been sapped from this, like, faith-based community, and I think people want to live in the past and live in, you know,
people love the
what
past.
was they do. And so it's like, what was radical 1400 years ago isn't going to cut it anymore. Right. So, like,
it's like, they were still wearing, like, chainmail or, like,
right. Yeah, exactly. And it's, I mean, I was like, yeah, truly. And so I think that's why, you know, I also, again, like, bringing it back to, like, Roxane Gay, I appreciate her because, you know, in Bad Feminist, like, she talks about all these groups that feminism needs to include in order for it to be feminism. And it's like, does your feminism include practicing Muslim women? And for so many white feminists, it doesn't. So everything about my existence is the antithesis to their brand of feminism.
Right.
As, you know, as far as, like, a visible practicing Muslim woman.
I think we'll have some very interesting conversations regarding, like, white feminism maybe later on once, like, the girls are closer, and especially during Sana's season. I think there will have y'all will have some interesting shit to say regarding, like, how they kind of see each other and whatever.
Yeah. Actually, and so as a kind of as, like, a soundbite answer to your question, in case we do edit out all that stuff, I think when people negative. No, I think it's one of those things where when people say that, and when that is their main point, like, Islam was the most feminist religion, they're usually not the ones out there doing the work, fighting for women, fighting, you know, doing the work of feminism. It's usually, because then, they're stuck in the past, they're hung up. It is, and it's like, what are you actually doing for me? Like, you're actually not helping, you're just taking up space.
Right.
Move. But I think for a lot of Muslim women, they do find, I don't know, I don't want to even say that, because I think it's a different experience for everyone. But, like, I've certainly found a lot of the answers to questions that I'm looking for. And when there is an issue, it's typically not the religion that I have an issue with, it's the man behind it. So hashtag yes all men.
Wow. Okay, Maryam, if you believe in equality, so, like, you want extra rights. That's my new favorite thing that people are saying. Like, you want extra rights. It's like, what the fuck
you want
are
special
extra
treatment.
rights?
special treatment.
Is that what they say? I've seen extra rights so much. I was
Really?
like,
I haven't
that's just
seen
like
that.
not a thing.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, what else do we want to talk about in this episode? Isak singing I'm Yours, so lovely. He also sings Lonely by Akon, which is really important. It's so interesting now, rewatching it, I'm noticing all of these subtle times whenever he's being a conniving little motherfucker trying to get close to Jonas behind Ava's back. And I mean, I love him so much. I think he's like such a fucking sweetheart dear. I do love him. But like, whenever like Jonas like goes to, like comfort Ava whenever she's like pissed about the trivia thing, like he's like visibly upset that like they are showing physical intimacy, and I was like I kind of like melted away because like I experienced that moment distinctly and got called out for it once. So it's fine. Like this is not like some sort of like pity party podcast. That's my other one. Oh, but I think the important thing to say is that this episode ends with Ava seeing that Noura accepted her friend request, and my note was, fuck these guys, Noura accepted. Like, that's...
That is truly one of my favorite, I think, scenes in all of season 1. Partially because, like, the tension at that point is now so high. Like, Isak and Ilias are being little shits on top of Jonas. Like, they're sitting there giggling in the middle of the fight. So eventually Ava like goes into the room by herself. And that song Berlin by Ryex, like when that starts playing, I'm obsessed with Ryex, and he went through this, like, he used to go by his name Rye Cummings, and he was like this like indie sort of like acoustic sounding artist. He had this song with Sarah Bareilles called Always Remember Me, I think. Yeah, so he went through that. He was like very much like the attractive Australian. He still is, but he's now kind of reinvented himself into this like indie, or I don't know. He's just more
very brooding,
edgy, I guess, than very less pop-y. I think he was like more of an acoustic pop kind of thing. But anyway, so I've just always loved him like since high school. He's kind of been one of those artists that flies under the radar, which is also why I like him a lot. But anyway, so yeah, as soon as that song started playing, it was like a song that I was familiar with. And so that always makes me a little bit emotional when I'm watching a scene and there's a song that I already love that starts playing. And then you see that Noura has accepted her friend request. And I just am like a mess, like just so emotional because I think it's so sweet. And it's like this breaking point where the guys are being so awful. And now we can find, like, we have this perfect spot for her to introduce now into, like to make these friends at school. And it's a great beginning.
I mean, the end of the episode is definitely more hopeful than the rest of it.
Wow.
I mean, just to bring the story full circle in case you guys didn't know.
We get it.
Yeah, Sam, I'm getting the sense that you didn't like this episode.
Yeah, just this one episode of all of them.
Wow.
You can like...
I'm going to say my least favorite phrase, agree to disagree.
I mean, I agree with like everything that's been said, and I think there was a lot of value in the episode. I just like was not... I don't know.
I'm going to edit out every time you say bored and say loved. So I'm going to edit my voice in saying loved. Or like, love, I don't know.
Don't censor her.
I'm not. I'm going to edit her. Speaking of feminism. Okay, is there anything else we want to say about this episode? I love that they use Lord, A World Alone. So good.
And that's how it starts, but then she's not alone at the end. I also like the interplay of her being alone and Isak being alone. Like, I think that's... I mean, I don't like it, but I like appreciate what they're doing there.
Okay, so what's a fun way to end this episode?
Well, I don't think that I should do it because I don't feel like I was very fun today.
That's okay.
Because again, I didn't enjoy this episode.
Like that's so wild to me.
I know. I love this episode because I feel like it builds up so many things.
And I also feel like I couldn't, like, the things that I love, I can never I'm not saying you're nitpicking, I'm using that word, but like the things I love, I don't think I could ever like nitpick to the point where it's like I didn't like that. Like, you know
So
how,
I feel like
okay, go ahead. You sound a little
let
defensive
me-
too.
like,
So
let me just try and explain myself one more time really quickly, because I think it's important. I want to really like bring up the fact that I'm an American every episode of this podcast.
okay.
You do.
I was not entertained. Like,
Oh.
Sorry.
I watched it. I took in the
Were you not
exactly
entertained?
right. I'm not like proud of this, but like I watched it. I took in the information. I got it pretty quickly. It kept happening. I wasn't entertained.
The thing that makes me so sad about what you just said is I took in the information.
I mean,
like that makes me so sad. Like you were just like
It's
downloading
just the culture of consumption. You know?
I know what you're playing.
All right, so what'd you think? Were you entertained? Did you love episode 2? Did you hate it? Who are some of your problematic faves? We really do want to hear from you, so definitely hit us up online at theskamwatchpodcast.tumblr.com, and you can answer any of those questions. You can answer questions that we pose to each other on the podcast, or you can ask us new questions and make suggestions about things that we should be talking about. And as always, please subscribe, rate, and share our podcast if you're so inclined. So next episode, we're talking about season 1, episode 3, We're the Biggest Losers at School. And I'm so excited for this episode. I'm really excited to talk about it, and I'm excited for you to hear it. So until then.
300 000 kroner!